If I told you that you are one of the most unpopular players in the NHL, would you be surprised?
No.
There's the smile.
He was one of the best at getting under your skin, and you could with that smile after he did it. It was that was enough to drive you nuts. I'll tell you that.
I shouldn't laugh, but still, it's tough to be retired. WWF would make a call to him.
Some players can coast by on their natural talent, but other players have to fight their way into the NHL and have to do whatever it takes to stay there. Over the years, we've seen many players sacrifice their skill set to make it and remain in the greatest league in the world. This is the story of one such player, an underrated and skilled forward in juniors who changed his game, battled his way to the top, and never backed down. And in the process, he became one of the most hated or beloved players depending on what team you cheered for during his tenure. Matthew Barnaby fought over 400 times between the juniors and the NHL, taking on everyone from Eric Lindros to Zdeno Chara. And despite having a fighting record comparable to journeyman boxing legend Luis Peotchi, standing at just 6 foot and weighing 190 pounds, Barnaby would chirp, hit, and scrap just about anyone. So get ready, boys. We're going to talk about the fearless journey and relentless spirit of Matthew Barnaby, and how he was able to make it to the NHL and stay there. Born on May 4th, 1973 in Ottawa, Ontario, the legal name on Matt's birth certificate was actually Neil Barnaby, later crossed out. He never knew the reason behind it, but suspected it might be tied to somebody in his father's family. Matthew never knew his father, raised by a loving single mother and his older brother, who was 14 years his senior. Despite not knowing his father, Matt never felt his absence. When he saw a sports psychologist throughout his career and was asked about his father's impact, his response was simple: he was never in my life. He recalls never even really thinking about his father, except for on Father's Day at school when the other kids would make things for their dads, but other than that, he never really thought of him much. Interestingly enough, Barnaby wasn't even Matt's last name. Technically, it should have been Houston after his father, or Simmons, which was his mother's maiden name. The last name Barnaby came from his brother Brent's father's name. Though his brother's father wasn't around much either, Matt's mother wanted her two boys to share the same last name. Matt had a great mother, a great brother, and a supportive grandmother. "I'm Matthew Barnaby, and that's good enough for me," he would say, embracing his chosen identity with pride. Growing up, Matthew was a very talented baseball player and enjoyed playing soccer. Anyone who knew Matt growing up recognized him as that energetic, sporty kid. He was also a late bloomer, always known as the runt of the pack. Matt started to skate when he was just 5 years old. Matt never cared much for school. It wasn't like he was a bad student or anything. He just really only cared about one thing: hockey. His life revolved around hockey. When Matt was between the ages of 4 and 5, he could flawlessly recite the entire 1977 Montreal Canadiens roster and all of their numbers. Every Saturday from the ages of 8 to 15, like many of us growing up, Matty would practice during the morning, play some street hockey during the day, and then wind down with pizza and a 2-liter of soda while watching Hockey Night in Canada. As a kid playing, Matt was never much of a fighter. He preferred to trash talk. And at this time, Matt was still just 5'2" and only 120 pounds, considerably smaller than most 14-year-olds playing hockey. As a result, he was cut from both his minor Bantam and major Bantam junior teams for being too small. These setbacks led Matt to reconsider his future. He felt like a failure and even contemplated quitting hockey altogether. He would take up a job at a lumberyard with his brother, but after just one day, he realized that working there wasn't for him. The experience would reaffirm his decision to stick with hockey. It was this experience, coupled with the doubt of others, that pushed Matt to strive even harder. A lot of things can motivate you, Matt would say. When I was in the 9th and 10th grades at Philmont Wright High School, Mrs. Hoffsmith, my science teacher, would always make fun of me for saying I would make the NHL one day. So when I made it in '92 and I had my first interview on Hockey Night in Canada, I made sure to thank her for telling me I wasn't going anywhere in life. Now that was real motivation. After being cut from his AAA team once again in 1990, he would play AA hockey. It was during this time that Matt finally hit his growth spurt at the age of 16. After putting up an impressive 93 points in 50 games, he had high hopes of being noticed by some teams in the Q. However, after 18 rounds in the QMJHL draft, Matt went unselected. Devastated by going undrafted, Matt rethought everything once again. Until the very next day. See, Matt found out while reading a magazine that there were actually 20 rounds in the QMJHL draft back then, and he was the 198th pick, the very last selection in the draft, by the Beauport Harfangs. Despite having no clue where Beauport was, Matty was ready to go. After a summer of non-stop training, Barnaby arrived at training camp and would meet up with head coach Alon Cheney upon the two's first encounter with each other. Despite being the last pick in the draft and only weighing 150 pounds, Barnaby confidently told Cheney, "I'm gonna make this team and you won't be able to cut me." Cheney would go on to become one of the most important people in Matt's hockey journey, and it was during Matt's first training camp with the team that his life and career would change forever. On Matt's third day of training camp, his mother and brother called expressing their desire to come down to Quebec City to watch him play in one of the team's inter-squad games. Matt, feeling discouraged and doubtful about making the team, told them not to bother. He believed the other players were just too big and strong. That's when Barnaby received the best advice he could have hoped for. His older brother told him to do something to stand out. Believe it or not, Matt had never fought before. It simply wasn't a part of his game. Determined to make an impression, Barnaby asked a teammate who the toughest guy on the ice was. The teammate pointed out Guy Lefebvre, a 6'3", 220-pound giant. When they lined up for Barnaby's next shift, the scrawny 17-year-old nervously asked Guy, "You want to go?" and proceeded to get stomped. But Matt was willing to do whatever it took to make his dream a reality. So, when they both stepped out of the penalty box, he asked with a smile, "You want to go again?" and got pounded for the second time. At the start of the following period, Matt skated by the other team's bench, shouting, "All right, who wants to f***ing go? Let's go!" and once again, got stomped for a third time. Over the next 3 days, Barnaby said he fought about 13 times and lost every single one. A true sign of things to come. Everyone thought this kid was crazy and had a death wish. But he was doing exactly what he wanted. He was getting noticed. By the end of camp, Coach Alon Cheney would approach Barnaby and say, "We can only keep 20 players on the team, but I want you. So you'll stay as an extra, and I'll work with you as a project. You're a crazy motherfucker. Congrats, you made the team." Coach Cheney loved Matt's attitude from the start, and his refusal to give up and quit. Over the next 2 years in the Q spent with Beauport, Matt embraced his new role with the team. However, over time, his skill and finesse game began to emerge once again, as he became more accustomed to the league. Matt's playing style was starting to draw attention, and by the time his draft year arrived, he wouldn't have to wait until the last pick of the draft this time. In the 4th round of the 1992 NHL draft, the Buffalo Sabres chose Matthew Barnaby as the 83rd overall pick. Remarkably, this kid, who was the final selection of the QMJHL draft and had never made any AAA teams growing up, now had a shot at playing in the big leagues. In Matt's next chapter, during his rookie training camp in the NHL, he was once again determined to catch the attention of his new team. So during their first scrimmage, he found himself up against a young Brad May. The encounter unfolded as one might expect. Brad May beat up Barnaby pretty badly. After the fight, May would skate up to Barnaby and say, "I fucking love you, kid. I see you skating around hitting all these guys. Just stay away from me. As expected, when the Sabres training camp ended, Matt Barnaby was sent back down to juniors. But he had tasted the NHL and knew that with the right moves, he could carve out a long career. 1993 would be a crazy year for Barnaby. He would be traded 3 different times, and at the end of the year, he would get to see his lifelong dream come true. After 19 games, 35 points, and a staggering 144 penalty minutes, Matty was traded to Verdun. There, in just 33 games, he posted his best scoring output by far, recording 26 goals and 61 points, along with 217 penalty minutes. And Barnaby would be traded yet again to finish off his CHL career with the Victoriaville Tigers, recording 15 points in 13 games, along with 87 penalty minutes and 6 points in 6 playoff games. And to top it all off, he finished the season playing in 2 games for the Buffalo Sabres. After his 111-point season in the QMJHL, Barnaby scored his first NHL goal in his second game against the Philadelphia Flyers. He also appeared in 1 playoff game for Buffalo, where he tallied an assist, making for one hell of a year. In '94, Barnaby would make the Sabres opening night roster out of training camp and score on opening night against the Boston Bruins. Despite the promising start, Barnaby would spend the '94 season bouncing between Rochester and Buffalo, maintaining a point-per-game pace in the AHL. Even being a top 6 forward in the AHL, Barnaby knew that he belonged in the NHL and was determined to prove it every night. So he made sure to stand out, and one particularly insane moment in Rochester stood out. One night in the A, Barnaby accidentally clipped Brian Kern with a high stick, while Kern was playing for the Cape Breton Oilers, causing a significant amount of bleeding. As a result, Barnaby would be ejected from the game, and Kern would need stitches in Rochester's training room. While Barnaby was getting undressed, he overheard Kern, as he was only 20 feet away from the dressing room, shout, "I'm gonna kill that fucker. That pussy piece of shit." In response, Barnaby walked over and retorted, "I'm right here, fuckhead. Let's go." Kern attempted to get off of the table with the doctor standing by, needle in one hand and a thread hanging out of his eye, and Barnaby jumped him. The two wrestled, exchanged punches in the hallway, skates clattering on the cement floor. Security guards would struggle to separate the two, but once they did, both players carried on as if it was just another day. Following the incident, Barnaby spent the remainder of the season with Buffalo, appearing in 35 games where he scored 2 goals and tallied 7 points and accumulated 106 penalty minutes. Barnaby also appeared in 3 playoff games, adding 17 penalty minutes to his record. The following year, because of the 1995 lockout, Barnaby's experience was largely similar. He would spend half of the season in the AHL, but once the NHL resumed play, he would never go back to the minors. In '96, Barnaby had his breakout season, netting 15 goals and amassing 335 penalty minutes. This season also featured Barnaby's most infamous moment, his epic fake-out on goaltender Garth Snow that cemented his reputation in the league as hockey's biggest troll. In 1997, despite missing the first few weeks of the season due to contract disputes, Barnaby had his career-best season, scoring 19 goals and putting up 43 points, including 4 points in 8 playoff games. By '98, he had established himself as a beloved fan favorite in Buffalo, someone who would do anything, fight anyone, as long as he thought it would help the team win. Early in the season, in a game against the Coyotes, Barnaby was hit from behind near center ice by Jocelyn Lemieux in what he described as the hardest hit he had ever taken. And despite losing all of his teeth, breaking his nose, and bleeding profusely, Barnaby refused to leave the game. Matt demanded to be put back on the ice to confront Lemieux, showing his tenacity and dedication to the game and his team. Throughout the '98 season, there were tensions between Barnaby and head coach Lindy Ruff. This came to a head during a practice following a game in Tampa that the team won 7-3. Barnaby and Ruff got into a heated argument, culminating in Matt throwing a skate through a big screen TV in the dressing room and declaring that he wanted to be traded. Ruff responded by challenging Barnaby to a fight, and he declined, suggesting that they settle it away from the team's eye. And somehow this didn't result in Matt getting traded. Instead, throughout the '98 playoffs, Matt was able to showcase his skills with 7 goals and 6 assists in 15 games, marking a standout performance on the grandest stage. But on May 10th, 1998, Mother's Day, with his mom in the stands, everything came together for Matt Barnaby. He recorded a natural hat trick, an incredible moment for him and his family. Considering all his mother had done for him, raising him as a single parent, it was truly a special moment in Matt's career and life. And as Matt stated in his book, whenever this moment is brought up, it still gives him chills to this day.
To Montreal. And the hats start coming down. There's the son to the mother and back again. She can't believe it. Timing is everything. What a day for her to be here in this building.
As the '99 season got underway, tensions between Barnaby and coach Lindy Ruff escalated even further, hinting at an eventual trade. True to expectations, on March 11th, 1999, Barnaby was traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins, where he quickly became a favorite among teammates. Well, most of them anyways. He would really get under goalie Tom Barrasso's skin. In Barnaby's own words, he described Barrasso as a quiet guy, but the word cocky didn't even do him justice. He was the most arrogant person I have ever met. I can laugh about it now. I remember asking Tommy what kind of Ferrari he drove to the rink one day. He responded, "Don't worry about it, kid. You'll never be able to afford one." At one of Barnaby's first practices in Pittsburgh, he took a slap shot from the hash mark and it went right over Barrasso's head and he scored. After he scored, Barnaby was just laughing, high-fiving his new teammates when Barrasso charged out of the crease and blurted, "How many Hart trophies do you have? How many Stanley Cups have you won?" "That's right, only 66 and 68 shoot hard top glove slap shots on me. You keep it low." Despite their differences, Barnaby and Barrasso would coexist, with Barnaby acknowledging Barrasso's unique lifestyle and self-assured nature. Barnaby's time in Pittsburgh also saw a shift in his role. He went from sporadic fights with tough opponents to taking on the toughest guys nearly every night. In Barnaby's new chapter in Pittsburgh, he quickly won over the fans, and before he knew it, he was facing off against his old mates in Buffalo, and he made sure to make the most of it. Early in the first period, he scored against Dominik Hasek, then went by the bench chirping Sabres coach Lindy Ruff, enjoying every damn minute of it. Funny enough, the night before the game, Matt would share a meal and some wine with Rob Ray, who cautioned him against any reckless behavior. Despite the warning, Matt remained committed to his aggressive style, embracing his role as the villain in Buffalo. Chirping at Ruff and his former teammates, Matt engaged in physical play, even getting into a spirited fight with Ray. Heading into Barnaby's first full year in Pittsburgh in 2000, rumors swirled about the team potentially folding and relocating to Portland. Despite facing challenges, Barnaby continued to deliver consistent performances, even amidst missed games due to concussions. His knack for racking up penalty minutes remained intact. However, around the midpoint of the 2001 season, Barnaby found himself on the move once more, this time to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Despite his best efforts, including leading the league in penalty minutes that season, Barnaby felt underutilized in Tampa after 2.5 seasons. As a result, he sought out a trade yet again, leading him to the Big Apple. After a stretch of uncertainty, Matt Barnaby found his groove with the New York Rangers, and despite being part of a really talented roster, the team struggled to make it into the playoffs during his tenure. Despite his popularity and personal success in New York, the team failed to achieve its potential. potential. Being an unrestricted free agent the following offseason, Matt could sense another trade coming. In March 2004, Rangers general manager Glenn Sather made significant moves, sending Barnaby and several others to different teams. This marked the end of Barnaby's time in New York, as he prepared to join the Colorado Avalanche now. As Matt's career started to wind down, despite being a part of a pretty stacked Colorado team, this was ultimately the closest Barnaby would get to winning the Stanley Cup, as the Avalanche would fail to find success in the playoffs. Reflecting on his journey, Matt noted, "You only really get a chance to hit free agency once." And when he became a free agent following the 2004 season, it was his turn to cash in. Plus, he wanted to give himself a chance to win the Stanley Cup. But money comes first, because you never know how long you're going to be able to play the game. "I wanted to set up my family, so I wanted money in the bank, so I don't have to worry about my kids ever having to struggle like I did." And although Matt had a good offer on the table from Colorado, a 4-year term, but for less money, he decided to sign a 3-year deal for a bit more money with Dale Talon, the GM of the Chicago Blackhawks. "Hindsight is 20/20, Barnaby said, but I should have taken the Colorado deal. In free agency, you try to find the right situation that gives you what you're looking for. I was looking for success and security. I ended up picking the wrong spot." And unfortunately, his Blackhawks debut would have to wait a little bit, as it looked like there was going to be another lockout for the 2005 season. But Matt would still treat the offseason like any other, taking a little bit of time off and then working out extremely hard. And he hoped that there would eventually be a resolution. However, the lockout resulted in the entire 2005 season being cancelled. In September of that season, Barnaby was supposed to go over to Sweden to play and stay in game shape. He even had his equipment ready and his bags packed. And as he went to leave his house, his son and daughter were crying, hanging onto each of his legs, and they begged him not to go. Needless to say, Matt didn't end up playing in Sweden that year. Instead, he and a bunch of guys in the Buffalo area rented ice for 4 days a week, skated, and did their normal workouts at the gym. When the 2006 season finally got underway, it was pretty tough for Barnaby to play in Chicago. Barnaby was a guy who would feed off the energy of the crowd, and at the time, Chicago was only drawing in about 6,000 fans in a 21,000-seat building. And despite Barnaby hoping to be a part of the rebuild in Chicago and Dale Talon loving him as a person and a player, the Hawks would ultimately buy out Barnaby following the 2006 season. Matt found himself a free agent once again with very few offers from teams. However, the Dallas Stars would take a chance and sign him for the 2007 season. But after over 800 games and 13 years of constantly taking punches to the head, things were finally starting to catch up with Matt. On December 20th, 2006, Matt faced off against Sean Thornton in Anaheim when they were playing the Ducks. They started throwing punches, and while Matt landed a few, Thornton managed to pull off Matt's helmet and land some hits to the head. And after the linesman stepped in, once Matt returned to the locker room, put ice on his head, and took some Advil, he realized he couldn't see out of his right eye. But he chose not to tell the team, fearing they would pull him from the lineup. Instead, he would switch to the right wing to better see the ice. A couple of games later, on January 9th, Matt would fight Josh Gratton in Dallas right in front of the Coyotes bench. Gratton threw some powerful punches, knocking off Matt's helmet. Despite his impaired vision, Matt tried to hang in there and land a few more punches, but following the game, he experienced brutal headaches and nausea. On the drive home from the game, he told his wife to pull over as he puked on the side of the highway. He then realized it was over, and he couldn't do this anymore. The next day, Matt informed the team that he couldn't practice due to persistent headaches. He met with coach Dave Tippett and GM Dave Armstrong, expressing the need to see Dr. Ed Levi, the top neurosurgeon in Buffalo. Together, they reviewed a DVD compilation of Matt's recent fights, and Dr. Levi confirmed the accumulated damage from constant blows to the head, ultimately suggesting to Matt that he quit playing. As he warned Matt, if you keep on playing, your symptoms are just going to get worse. At that moment, Matt decided that he had played his final game in the NHL. Matt deeply appreciated his time in Dallas, acknowledging Doug Armstrong and Dave Tippett as classy individuals. "Every player wants to end his career on his own terms," Matt said, "and I didn't get that opportunity, but I loved my year in Dallas. It was awesome to finish my playing career surrounded by great people. Matthew Barnaby concluded his career having played in 834 regular season games and 62 playoff games. Not bad for the very last pick in the QMJHL draft. Say what you want about Matthew Barnaby, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. His story is impressive. Despite being hated by almost everyone except his teammates or the fans of the teams he played for, he embraced every minute of it. He knew that he couldn't rely solely on his skill. He needed to stand out, and he did just that throughout his entire career. Transitioning from a pretty damn good junior player who talked trash and got under opponents' skins to a brawler who had to fight almost every night at times in the NHL just to survive and make a career for himself. From being the undersized kid who was cut from his AAA teams growing up to being the very last pick in the QMJHL draft, Barnaby really had no business being in the NHL, but he did what he had to do to make it, and he spent 14 years in the best hockey league in the world, trolling some of the best players on the planet. Before I go, I just want to give a big thanks to everyone watching, and a huge thanks to Barnaby himself, because this video wasn't nearly as interesting before I read his amazing book, Unfiltered. This book is filled with some of the craziest hockey stories you'll ever hear, and most of which I couldn't even share in this video due to how graphic they are, so I highly recommend checking out Barnaby's book. And once again, thank you all so much for watching. Like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you boys in the next one.